All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. We got Arlen with us in the house for an Arlen Monday. Arlen, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. The sun's outside. It's looking good. And, lots of things happening in the news, as we know.
Arlen, you look good. You made some changes to your internet setup at home, and apparently, clearly it's working out because you come in nice and strong right now, and we're going to continue our endeavors to have really outstanding audio visual. Arlen, we started a little late today. That's all on me. I had to change the title of today's live stream. Originally, I was looking at it, Trump shot, Taylor endorses, Arlen and I argue, but you corrected me. Trump was not actually shot, correct?
I don't think he was even, the gun was even pointed at him as far as I know.
Yeah, he was. I changed it to Trump threatened. I just rebooted that now. So I think that's fair. Although he wasn't even on the green or the hole. This was on the golf course down in Florida yesterday. And Secret Service agents who were one hole ahead of the former president actually saw a rifle poking through the tree or brush on the course, and the agent started firing. So the potential assailant or assassin quickly ran and was arrested. We've got a clip of that. It's it's important news, although I don't know how it changes much in terms of what Arlen and I, how we perceive this election coming up. But before we do that, Arlen, even though that's really important news, obviously, you know me, I always focus, at least I have for 11 plus months now, on the people of Palestine who are so beset. And it breaks my heart every time I see these stories. I can't not share them. Some people say, well, why do you do it? I can't. I mean, to me, this is our modern day Holocaust. So do I overdo it, Arlen? Do I overdo this?
A little bit more than most people would, I think. But it is obviously something important, and a lot of people are dying. A lot of civilians are dying, and it is tragic, and something needs to be done to halt that kind of slaughter.
Okay, real quick, I'm not going to belabor it today, but many more killed over the weekend, tragically. This is from the Turkish news service, TRT World. They have 41 to 26 confirmed dead, but indicate that that's a very conservative number, with perhaps 10,000 uncounted buried under rubble of annihilated homes. We've got an image here. Let's see if we can get that up there. That was, and the reason I don't always show images, but this was from today. So that is an actual home that was just bombed at a refugee camp in Gaza City. So Israel not following any of the, quote, rules of war. I mean, obviously, as General Sherman said, war is hell, and he brought the war home to the Southerners who fought it, obviously, and we get that, but I can't justify, even frankly understand Israel bombing refugee camps, Arlen.
Well, whether we understand Israel or not, we got to make sure that the United States of America, our country, is not enabling this to happen. And I think our government needs to do more. I'm hoping that Kamala will, make some gestures, some movements in that direction of maybe, restricting Netanyahu and taking away some of his money and weapons as an indication that, hey, you got to change your policy.
Arlen, I appreciate you bringing up Harris. She's the Democratic candidate, and I know some Zionists fear she's not staunchly enough on Israel's side, despite her repeating several times she has unwavering support for Israel. I think that's got it completely wrong. I think the support should be for the victims, and we should be doing everything we can to stop Israel, but instead we're enabling what Israel's doing. We'll get to that. I got kind of a pointed question for you in a second, but just the numbers here. With the full support of the Biden-Harris administration, Israel's killed over 41,226 Gazans since October 7, and at least 120 since Friday. So, Arlen, you made the point when we've debated this and discussed it. You've said to me, Hal, and you've said this on the air, I don't think I'm speaking out of school. Hal, you got to give Harris a chance. You've been very empathic. You've acknowledged my concerns. You've recognized that she hasn't spoken out in a way that either of us would like. But nevertheless, and correct me if you've changed your view or if I'm mischaracterizing, but you feel that she deserves a chance. Is that correct?
Well, what bothers me is, like you put there, the Biden-Harris administration, and the Republicans really, jump on that too. They always blame her for everything that Biden did. I think that's not really fair, because if you're vice president, you can't go do something different than your president is doing. Your job is to support the president. And, she doesn't really have any choice, I think, in this matter. So I'm hoping if she were elected that, maybe she'll do some things a little bit different, and maybe just gradually, increase the pressure on Netanyahu. It doesn't have to, she would get in a lot of trouble if she just cut off everything, of course. But there are moderate ways, I think, to put pressure on the Israeli government, and I hope she does that.
Well, let me ask you this, because it sounds like I use that term, give her a chance, pointedly, deliberately, but I think that's your position. She at least should get a chance. And so I'm going to ask you it this way. In 2016, when Donald Trump was running against Hillary Clinton, whose record was quite bad. I mean, she had supported the disastrous war on the people of Iraq. She had fomented a revolution in Honduras, which deposed a socialist in favor of military junta. She famously snickered and giggled when Gaddafi was killed by our troops, turning Libya into a terrorist training zone. So her record was awful. Did you argue at that point, well, we got to give Trump a chance because Hillary's done so much harm? No, you took the opposite position. You said we can't give Trump a chance. So why do you argue we should give Harris a chance when she has as bad a record, I believe, or not quite as bad as Hillary. She hasn't had as much power as Hillary, but her record is quite poor. But you want us to give her a chance, but you wouldn't give Trump a chance.
Well, Trump has an entire lifetime of doing the absolute worst things and just awful things. I think Harris has matured since 2016 or whatever. You can see it in the way that she, debated, and the way that she, is talking. And she's obviously matured. She's smart. So I'd like to believe that she's smart enough to know that we have a bad policy when it comes to Israel, and that too many people are being killed. And she said as much. She said some stronger things than Biden has about how horrible it is for the civilians. So, I don't know, Hal. I have no way of knowing for sure, but I'm just hopeful.
I appreciate that answer, Arlen. Thank you. Again, you're watching Halitics. It's an Arlen Monday. Please click like. Please click subscribe. I showed the subscribe, little meme, or what do you call? I don't even know, the little video there, the little GIF. I think it's called a GIF, actually. I'm terrible with all these words. I think I'm starting to lose my mind here. I had to change the title. Arlen, so just real quick, I don't want to spend too much time on, I guess Trump menaced is the right word, but let's see if I can get this up, just because I think first of all, it's really important news. I mean, the former president running for office right now, running for to be, put back in office after he lost. And there was a guy with a gun, right? So is this, you know what? Actually, I am going to show the video. I wasn't going to spend too much time on this because we have so much else to get to, but there's some stuff in that video. If I can get to it, I want to show. So let's see if we can get the recorded video here. And the reason is because the guy who shot at Trump, it's sort of an interesting, he was apparently motivated in part. Let's see if we can get this up.
Donald Trump is safe, a suspect is in custody, and the FBI is investigating what it calls an apparent assassination attempt on the former president Sunday at his Florida golf club. Authorities say a Secret Service agent spotted a rifle in the bushes near where Mr. Trump was golfing Sunday afternoon and opened fire.
They have an agent that jumps one hole ahead of time to where the president was at. And he was able to spot this rifle barrel sticking out of the fence and immediately engage that individual.
Agents rushed Mr. Trump to safety. According to the sheriff, a witness saw the suspect run out of the bushes and jump into a black Nissan. He was arrested a short time later. 3 law enforcement sources tell NBC News that suspect has been identified as 58-year-old Ryan Wesley Ruth. Ruth was unarmed when arrested, and it's not clear if he ever fired a weapon. But investigators say they recovered an AK-47 style rifle with a scope, 2 backpacks, and a GoPro camera at the scene, not far from the former president.
Probably between 300 and 500 yards, but with a rifle and a scope like that, that's not a long distance.
The suspect has a long criminal and civil court history. He's also been outspoken on his support for Ukraine. In an interview with Semaphore last year, Ruth discussed his efforts helping volunteers with the war effort there.
All right, so just a couple of thoughts I had on this. That's what I wanted to share. It was, first of all, his support for Ukraine, obviously not happy with Trump's call for peace with Russia. But before we get to that, Arlen, this is yet another example of the deadly nature, the fear we all go through because of the easy access people have to these weapons of mass destruction.
Absolutely. And I'll be honest, Al, I don't think it really matters anything about this potential assassin, who he is, what he did. It's really not important. I think the important thing is that he was able to get access, that close to the president. He shouldn't have been able to get onto that golf course at all. So I think it's really a reflection of how poorly the Secret Service has been doing. And I think I heard Biden say they need more resources, and they certainly could use it because it really makes them look bad. But, there's always going to be, thousands of people who are willing to kill, Trump or Harris or anybody like that. It's just up to the Secret Service to make sure they don't get anywhere close.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem for the Secret Service, and the head of the Secret Service, or former head, resigned in disgrace after the previous attempt on Trump, which actually did result in him getting injured. He was shot and had the ear wound, although obviously it turned out to be not particularly serious. So that said, though, a couple things. Yes, the weapons. This is the Republicans aren't calling for, strict limits on gun control, even though their nominee, anything. They're not calling for any law changes whatsoever, even though their nominee has been menaced once and shot another time. This is a terrible indictment, I believe, of our political system. You're right. Also, with respect to the Secret Service, they don't have the resources. There are a lot of issues, but if we're not going to have a Praetorian guard that's just, with 50, 75 people at all times protecting the presidential nominees, then doesn't that argue even more strongly for better gun control?
Just a side note, as we were watching Trump the other day, Nancy, my wife, pointed out that his ear doesn't show any kind of wound or anything like that. It looks totally fine. You'd think there'd be something, a mark, a Band-Aid, or I don't know. It's just interesting to me. And, but I think...
Ears heal quickly, though. There's a lot of blood. I mean, just to say that is true. Ears heal quickly. I mean, you're not... And I don't think you're suggesting this, but... It has been confirmed that he was shot right in the ear. I mean, it's not like there's doubt about that, or is there doubt? Maybe there is.
Some people, I think, still have some doubts. I don't know.
Okay. Do you?
But no, I believe, he could have been. Well, he was shot at no matter what. And so, that doesn't really change anything there. I think, what? One thing I was thinking about is if he had gotten shot and injured or killed, or if the same thing happened to Harris, I think our system is not prepared for that. What would we do? The Constitution doesn't say anything about these kind of things coming just before an election. So I think we have to start thinking about things like this.
Well, that's a good point, too. I suppose it would be Vance who would take over, but you're right. We don't have there's nothing really designed for a situation like this, which is, I think, an argument possibly for the parliamentary system where you vote for a party, not necessarily a candidate, and then the party elects. If the party, they have to build a coalition government if they don't have a majority. Turn down Arlen's volume just a little bit for me, so hopefully it won't bleed in. I thought I had corrected that problem, but I don't always succeed at doing so. Yeah, I mentioned the issue with Ukraine. We'll get to that in a little bit. Not to say that Trump's position does or doesn't justify, obviously you don't shoot at presidential candidates. But let's get to this story first, Arlen, that you also proposed or you want to discuss. So there we can get the extraordinarily famous, extraordinarily affluent, extraordinarily popular Taylor Swift, and she's hugging her cat. Obviously, that's a dig at the aforementioned Vance, who, what's his name? What's his first name? I know there's a lot of Vances. Cyrus Vance. I know a Paul Vance. Who's the one who's
JD? I don't know.
JD Vance. Yes, he said something about childless cat ladies, right? He made fun of them. So there's Taylor with her cat, and she is childless. She has a boyfriend. I don't know what's going on with her and Kelsey. She was at the game last night cheering her man on. Here's what really triggered the MAGA people. Her endorsement on Instagram. Had to look around to find it. Was looking first on X and everywhere else before I could find this. But I highlight very long. She put a lot of thought and a lot of effort. If she did it, I'm going to assume she did. I believe she's a very intelligent woman. She writes her own music, so obviously if she can write songs, she can write an endorsement. So she said this, and Trump's well, before we get to Trump's response, Arlen, I assume you're jazzed by this. You're happy?
Yeah. No, I really am, because she's got a lot of power, a lot of influence. People look up to her. But I think what's most interesting, and I think it's she's really taken a risk, because she could lose some of her fan base and some of her customers, but she thinks that it's important enough that she take a stand, and I appreciate that. But I think what's most interesting about this story is that it just shows you how crazy Trump is getting when he says, "I hate Taylor Swift." I mean, that certainly is going to hurt him. That can't help him. And he's saying, when he says things like that, then he's really losing it.
100%, Arlen. I mean, there's just no way he could have reacted more stupidly or in a more counterproductive way in terms of wanting to win the election. Just to get back to Taylor, I agree with you that there was a little bit of a risk involved. I remember back in the 90s, I believe, when Harvey Gantt was running for U.S. Senate. You and I may have discussed this against a really bad Republican, segregationist. I forget his name. He was kind of Strom Thurmond's partner in crime back then. And Gantt, who was the mayor of Charlotte, had a real shot at winning. He was black. And Michael Jordan, then perhaps the most popular North Carolinian, was asked, well, why don't you endorse Harvey Gantt? And his response famously is, Republicans buy sneakers too. And to Taylor's credit, she didn't say, well, Republicans or MAGA buy concert tickets and download my music. Now, I don't necessarily, support her endorsement. I would have preferred if she had endorsed Jill Stein, but she had she did what she thought was right. She acted consistent with her convictions. I don't think she's really, let's be honest, she's not taking much of a risk. She's one or two in terms of the most popular pop stars in the world. She's much more popular than either Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. And I don't think this is going to cost her.
She's popular in red states too, of course. So, I think that might, maybe discourage some people from going to her concerts or whatever. But one of the good things about what she did was she didn't just endorse Harris. She also, made a point of getting her young people to register to vote. And, from what I heard, it was like, hundreds of thousands of young people were going over and to register to vote. And so she was really, doing something that was just a little bit more than an endorsement. She was getting out the vote. Yeah.
And that response by Trump, I mean, I was just thinking, he really is unhinged. Because any sane advisor would have counseled him, and maybe they did, maybe not. I don't know if he even has any sane advisors. He may have fired anyone who ever questions anything he does, but would have said, yes, it's really frustrating, but be gracious, accept it in stride, say, hey, we were disappointed that Taylor Swift decided to endorse Kamala Harris. We believe our policies are best for all Americans, including her fans. But she decided to go in a different direction, and that's the beauty of our system. We're going to redouble our efforts to appeal to Ms. Swift and her fans. That would have been, such a better way to respond. I want to say better. I don't mean like as a human being. I mean, if you want to get elected president.
Yeah. But Hal, you gotta realize too that I don't think Trump is really thinking or processing any of this in a normal way. He's just reacting. If he hears something he doesn't like, he reacts. And I don't think there's any of his advisors that'll tell him what to do. I'm sure he's at a point where he just does whatever he feels works and is right. And when he goes to his rallies and speaks, and the MAGA fans cheer him, he figures, hey, I must be doing something right, so I'm going to continue saying the same things. And he's paying a price.
Well, I agree with pretty much everything you said. And I think the operative word there is feel. He acts based on emotion. He doesn't act on reason. And, sometimes that's good, right? If you act based on feeling because you are truly concerned about other people, you have compassion, that's a good thing. But not when you lash out because you're angry, resentful, bitter, which it seems Trump often does. And every now and then we see, I think, some humanity in him. You don't, but I do. And maybe we'll even play a clip of him showing some humanity. And for that, he also gets pilloried and excoriated, which is very unfortunate. On that topic, let's move on. Unless you have something else you want to say about Taylor, which is fine. I don't want to keep you muted or muzzled if you have any further thoughts.
But further thoughts are that Trump is crazier. He's saying crazier things. He's just reacting and doesn't really care what sounds mature or not. But the fact is too that he's only like 3 or 4 points behind in the polls, and I think normally I think Kamala Harris should be way ahead, 10 points ahead at least. So it worries me.
Well, we agree on one thing. We agree that this response, this reaction by Trump to the Swift endorsement is just more evidence, more proof, whatever, more weights on the scales that he should not be president. He does not, he lacks the appropriate temperament. In many areas, his policies are bad. He's not an honest person. So he should not be president. I think where you and I disagree is whether that means Kamala should be president. I would say no, she should not be either. But clearly, Trump should not be president. Moving now, since I think you got your point in, which I think is a fair one, let's get to another reason I think Trump, another reason you think Trump should not be president. I think the best argument for electing Trump, this his position on the Ukraine-Russia war, the proxy war that we're fighting against Russia with Ukraine. So you asked me to promote this story by David French, a New York Times conservative writer, and I mean conservative. Arlen, you, I assume. Let me instead of assuming anything, why did you want to discuss this piece?
Well, he made the point, and it's not really talked about almost anywhere else, is that they asked him lots of times does he want Ukraine to win, and he would not say that he does. So you gotta, and I think it's to the United States' advantage and the world's advantage that Ukraine win, because you can't let Russia win, or they're going to be more emboldened to go into other countries. So I think French wanted to just emphasize that point, that he wouldn't say that Ukraine should win. But
what does winning mean? I mean, I was a little bit, honestly, I'm not trying to be disingenuous. I don't really understand. And I read French's piece. We'll get to it. But real quick, and then I'm going to play the clip that French, because you're right, Trump has said in the past he wants there to be peace. He wants people not to die, which I frankly think is a great answer. And I think that answer without more is an argument, a pretty good argument for Trump to be elected president. But what do you think French means when he says he believes, and you believe also? What do you mean that Russia loses and Ukraine wins? What does that mean?
I think it mostly means that Russia does not win. If there was a settlement now, Ukraine would probably lose territory, and I think that would be a bad thing. But if Ukraine, comes back stronger like they're doing now, and fighting in Russian territory, then maybe Putin might be forced to stop doing what he's doing, and then we'd have then Ukraine would have their own country back, and Russia would not be emboldened to go on and do the same thing to other countries.
All right, let's play this clip real quick, and then we'll respond to some of what you had just said, Arlen.
Do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
All right, so I don't know how that's not a perfect answer, Arlen. How many more human lives are you or David French prepared to sacrifice in order to win, in quotations, whatever that means?
I'll give Trump credit. The only good thing about him is he's not a warmonger. I've never seen him, he doesn't sound like the kind of president that would, purposely start a war, especially a nuclear war. So I'll give him that much. But
that's pretty important, though, right? Let's be honest. That's not a little thing, right? I mean, yeah. In the grand scheme of things, his reaction to Taylor Swift is kind of a little thing. Although I do agree, it bespeaks a churlishness, an immaturity, lack of kind of perspective that is very ill-suited for a president or for pretty much anything, any job. But also not being a warmonger is pretty damn good if you're running for president, at least from my perspective.
Well, yeah, of course, the one thing that is bad about him is he seems to like dictators, like Putin and Kim Jong-un and Viktor Orbán and all these kind of people. So, he's hardly, so I think his foreign policy would not be a good one, but, if he doesn't start a war, that's better than nothing, I guess. But I think, just getting out of this war in Ukraine is not going to be enough. Ukraine has to go on the offensive and prove that they can stand up to Russia and give Russia more incentive to stop doing what they're doing.
Well, let's get into that in a moment, but would you agree that at least, and it seems like David French agrees, that right now this war has been really bad for Ukraine and frankly for Russia too? He says that. He says there have been all these people killed in Russia, and Russian loss of life has been tremendous, and it has been. So I think we can agree at least that the war has been awful.
Yeah, of course. And we'd all like it to be over, I would think, but I just don't want it to be over so that Putin wins and gains territory. I don't want that kind of a victory.
Well, if the war has been such a terrible mistake, then isn't that a pretty powerful indictment against the Harris-Biden policy of promoting the war and not pushing for peace, not negotiating for peace? I mean, here, just to show this real quick, Putin stopped now. He's also lost a tremendous amount. Russia's been terribly wounded by this war. So I don't really understand if we're agreeing both sides have paid a terrible, terrible price. Isn't that an argument that Harris, when she bragged during the debate that she rallied all these different countries, Poland and Germany and France, to all stand up against Putin, isn't that kind of an indictment of that policy rather than a policy to promote peace and to not have this happen in the first place and all these people to be killed and all this land destroyed as a result?
Well, No, I think what you're leaving out of all this is that it's Putin that started the war. He's the one that went into Ukraine. Ukraine didn't try to attack Russia. So the United States was, I think, within their rights to stop Putin from doing that kind of illegal and offensive war against Ukraine. And they rallied all the countries, all the Western countries, to get behind them and make sure that Putin doesn't win. So that's the key point, I think.
Well, why not rally them to say to Russia, hey, let's figure out how we can end this, stop the killing, and not see, another stalemate in Eastern Europe. That's the kind of wars that have been so destructive for thousands of years in Europe. And to that point, I note, this is from Responsible Statecraft, Kiev and Moscow, this is dateline September 22. Remember, the war started in 22. Russia invaded in 22. The war's been going on for 10 years or more. There have been hostilities. There's been shooting on both sides. Kiev has been shooting at Russian separatists. There's been an ongoing conflict and killing from both sides. But according to Responsible Statecraft, quoting from Foreign Affairs, the two sides were talking in the spring and early summer of 22, and they had a tentative deal, and then ultimately it was scuttled by the West, by Boris Johnson at the behest of the U.S. And since then, there's been no talks, virtually none. I remember in 23, you and I discussed this, Blinken issued a fiat, a blank demand, Russia, there's no talks, there's no negotiation until you get out of Ukraine. Well, they're not getting out. They've lost 100,000 men or more. It's been a disastrous war for them. And now Kiev has invaded towards Moscow. Why not again try to stop it, to end the war, which is exactly what Trump correctly points out. There you go. Johnson's efforts to stop negotiations. The West isn't ready for the war to end. That was in 22. I don't see how the policy that Harris-Biden can pursue, which again, Harris bragged about. She boasted rallying the troops, rallying the allies against Russia. It's been an absolute nightmare. And the people paying the price have been Ukrainians and Russians.
Well, Hal, I would be happy to see a peace deal. I think the entire world would be happy to see a peace deal. It would be a wonderful and great thing if Putin would agree to having a peace deal as well as Ukraine. But the terms have to be that Putin doesn't win anything. He doesn't get to take Ukraine territory.
Well, why would he ever agree to that? Then there's no negotiation. That's not a negotiation. That's not a negotiation if you say you've got all this territory that you've won in a bloodthirsty, in a bloodletting, right? In a disastrous bloodletting. You go in and you say, let's talk about how we can end this. And my guess is you'd get a lot of that territory back, probably in a demilitarized zone. The actual agreement that they came to was pretty reasonable. They didn't finalize it. There were some concerns. Apparently, Putin didn't want a mutually assured defense from all the West, which basically would have been, his biggest beef, he always said, I don't want NATO in Ukraine. I don't want NATO in Ukraine.
Well,
and
obviously,
and what happened was the agreement between Ukraine and Russia was, okay, we'll pull back. We'll pull back if you agree not to join NATO. We're not going to leave Crimea. We're keeping Crimea. Donbass, some parts of Donbass stay Russian, which is a Russian-speaking area, but we'll pull back out of the Ukrainian-speaking or German-speaking, whatever language they speak. They're mostly Ukrainian, some German. We'll pull back if there's a ceasefire deal and you promise not to go, and you promise not to join NATO.
Yeah, well, any territory that Russia has gotten up to now is illegal and therefore should not be allowed. Now, if you could get some kind of a peace deal, I think you're saying that, the territories would be the same, but Russia would get some promises from Ukraine that they wouldn't join NATO or something like that. I would go along with that. I think a lot of people would, but,
But Arlen, that's where they were in 22. That's where they were a month or two after the invasion, when Russia had taken a lot of Ukrainian land. Apparently, Zelensky and Putin were pretty close to a deal, which would have led to Russian withdrawal from Ukraine, except for, like I mentioned, some of the eastern territory. But Ukraine agrees not to join NATO. And Boris Johnson flew to Kiev and said, no, you're not going to settle that. You're not going to agree. That's what this article is saying.
Well, I don't know exactly what they agreed, what they were talking about agreeing to. But like I say, if as long as Putin doesn't win any territory, I'm all for any kind.
Well, now he's won it. I mean, you can say as long as he hasn't won it. But so would you say the war should go on for another 20 years? How many more Ukrainians are you prepared to sacrifice to in hopes of getting the territory back? Would you have missiles launched at Moscow?
Well, I think the Ukrainian people, have shown that they want to fight back, that they want to keep their country, and they should. They're entitled to keep their own country. So,
no one's saying they're going to lose the country. They're going to lose the country if they keep fighting. They're going to lose it. They're already losing it. And here's what Washington Post neocon David Ignatius posted today. This is in today's New York Times, Washington Post. It cannot fight forever. It's bleeding out.
Yeah, well, I like David Ignatius. He's a smart guy. I don't see that story, so I didn't read that story, so I'm not sure what he said. But obviously this killing it's been horrible for Ukraine. It's been horrible for the Russians too. They've lost a lot of people and a lot of military equipment and everything like that. And the war needs to stop, but at what terms? What's the cost?
Agreed. Of course, there has to be negotiating, but we're not negotiating. Trump is saying he wants to negotiate. So isn't that the right answer? Isn't he right? Let's negotiate. Let's solve this instead of fight forever. And when you say, or when French says, oh no, we can't let Putin win, right then we're saying we're not going to negotiate. We're not going to negotiate. Because Putin's going to be, of course he's going to say, are you kidding me? I've got all this real estate. I'm not going to just give it up. You're not going to get it back from me, especially when Ukraine is very close to collapse.
Yeah, well, I could see where, Putin would say that, but I don't think he's entitled to any of that land, which he took illegally. Now, I would really hope. Is that what we fight over, whether you're entitled to it, or do we fight over what the best deal we can get so there's not more tens of thousands of people killed? And look at this apartment building in Kiev, totally ruined. This woman's life is destroyed. That's in 23. This has been going on for another year because we won't negotiate. We refuse it because we have to show Putin. And this shows how aggressive Putin is, and how he doesn't care about human cost, because he's been, bombing hospitals and hotels and schools and everything since the beginning. So maybe I hope Kamala Harris, if she gets elected, would, be a little bit more open to ending the war, on a fair basis for everybody. Because, the tragedy of all the people being killed is horrible, just like it is in Gaza. And we don't need that.
All right. So there was a lot I wanted to get, but this is something that really strikes at me, Arlen. David French is a bad guy. David French's record is really, really bad. He's demonstrated that he's almost always wrong. Doesn't the fact that he opposes Trump and says Trump is wrong, doesn't that kind of suggest to you that maybe Trump is right? So let me show you this. After 21 years of legal practice, I changed careers. In 2015, I joined National Review. I can't believe that National Review has a lot of views that you agree with on anything. Then I started The Dispatch, a conservative media company. And then he goes on to The Atlantic, and then he joined The Times. And to kind of bring home the point that he's just not right. Most people recognized it took a long time. It took Hillary Clinton 11 years and an incredible amount of pressure and the threat of losing the primaries to Bernie. But in the end, she finally grudgingly painfully for her, acknowledge how wrong she had been to support the Iraq War. Well, David French didn't get that memo. In 2019, he defended the war. And here's what he said about that horrible conflict. 16 years later, I believed Iraq war was just and proper in 2003, and I still believe that today. So if he's going to say that, and remember, Trump was against the war pretty early on, doesn't that kind of make you think Trump might be right about Ukraine and French might be wrong, since he was so incredibly wrong, French was, about Iraq?
Well, he may have said some awful things in the past, and he may be right on this one particular thing. But I think there's so many Democrats, so many liberals, so many progressives that want to, see Ukraine win and for Russia to lose. That makes me feel confident enough. I could ignore what David French's past is.
Well, French writes there were few greater instruments of instability in the world than Saddam Hussein. That's what he says was the case in 2003. I find that an astonishing statement, given that the greatest instrument of instability in the world today right now and was then is the United States. We're the ones who destroyed the Middle East.
No doubt about it. Our history, our past is nothing to feel good about. We've done a lot of horrible things, and and that has to be recognized. And we have to be very careful what we do in the future, for sure.
But you still agree with French on Ukraine?
Well, he could be, even a right winger could be, right some of the time. But it's only the Republicans that I'm aware of that are not willing to, let Ukraine win. A lot of them are,
Well, they're not winning. They're not. I don't know. We've got a Democratic administration. We have been pouring billions and billions of dollars into Ukraine. Now, it's true we haven't green-lighted a thermonuclear war, which I presume we would win. But is that what we want?
No, of course not. But I think if we don't take on the task of beating Putin and saving Ukraine, then I think there'll be a worse price to pay later on.
All right, you're watching Halitics with Hal and Arlen. And Arlen, I do apologize if I've been too aggressive. I'm really trying not to be. I'm trying to not be Donald Trump and start yelling and talking in boldface, but I feel very, very strongly about this. I truly find the pro-war, we have to beat Putin position. Honestly, I feel like it ignores not just the people who've already been killed, but the many more who will die because of our continuing support for war, profitable though it may be for American multinational corporations. It's a humanitarian nightmare, just like the war by Israel on Palestine.
I respect you for caring a lot about civilian deaths and people dying, just as you do in Gaza. I mean, it's your show and you're entitled to your point of view, and I think in that respect that you don't want people to die, then I'm okay with that too. It's just a question of how are we going to do it exactly?
Well, I don't really know. When Trump says things like, and this will be my final word on this, and I just want to talk a little bit more about the Iraq invasion, and maybe we can get to another story. By the way, 240-242-5646 if you want to join us. Had a great call last week from Triple G. Anyone else want to join in? We'd love to hear from you. Also, I see PT tweeting. YouTube, you were waiting to be notified. Shay doesn't like that PT doesn't like that we started a little late because I changed the title. Okay, well, I apologize for that. I guess I should. We were only like 4 minutes late. It wasn't like it was 40 minutes late, but I hear you. Yeah, okay.
Well, Hal, you usually are late. It's okay with me.
Well, I know that's not fair, Arlen. I'm pretty close to on time.
Okay, well.
I'm pretty close to on time.
Times that we weren't.
It's, I think a minute or two people can, the beauty of YouTube is you can watch the shows anytime and we've had hundreds, by the way. Our last show had, I think is right now well over 600. So I really want to get to 1,000, 240-242-5646. But yeah, sorry about maybe I shouldn't have changed the title, but I didn't want to say he was shot because it was wrong. And people start watching and they're like, oh, he was shot. No, that was a pretty bad mistake. And I would have corrected it differently, but I didn't. Anyway, the situation in Iraq, this is why I find French so, not credible. Somebody I'm not going to believe if he tells me, it's raining, I'm definitely going out with just a T-shirt. So 20 years after the U.S. invasion, remember, he said he thought the Iraq war was a good thing. Doesn't mention our torture, nothing. It was a good thing. Iraq was a source of instability. Actually, Iraq was a source of stability. Iraq kept Iran somewhat in check. Iraq was a powerful bulwark between Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Syria, and destroying Hussein, who was one of the more moderate Arab leaders, did terrible things to that country. And those terrible things continue. It's not like it's now this wonderful, oasis of happiness and joy. So this is from last year, NPR. This was the most recent description I could get. So Fidel says, what is it like today in 23? 10 years ago, it was a city of towering blast walls separating neighborhoods. Car bombs were still pretty common. So people had to live through car bombs in 2013. Here is the description from Sherlock, which is a great name, by the way. I love the name Sherlock. Big fan of inhabitant 22.5 Baker Street. Yes. Well, it is generally better, those blast walls. There are fewer of them. Some of the checkpoints have been removed. There is some music. There's a little bit of nightlife, but it's still really hard. There's still attacks by ISIS, roadside bombs, militia violence. This is last year in Baghdad. It's almost worse because even worse is there's the healthcare system, education, it's all crumbling. This is all secondary to the U.S. invasion of Iraq that David French says was a good idea, that it was the right thing to do. It was just. And then just to finish this real quick, young people, if they had the chance, would leave.
Yeah, I think both you and I could agree that the Iraq War was a crime against humanity, really. We had no reason to go in there. We killed, untold amounts of people. And that's why it was also really hard for me to accept Dick Cheney's endorsement of Kamala Harris. I mean, he was probably the number one proponent of going in and, convinced Bush to go into Iraq. And so he is a criminal, a war criminal, I think, as was George W. Bush and the United States. That was a crime against humanity.
All right, Arlen, appreciate that. Nothing more to be added. We have a little more time. I was thinking we might be done at this point, but we have a little more. So to all the Trump haters out there, let's give you something else to chew on. Arlen, over the weekend, I don't always show the Sunday news or whatever what are they, pundits, what have you. I guess they do kind of a little bit like what I do, though not as well. Although they're on time, their shows are always on time. You turn on Meet the Press, it's always at 10 unless it's 11. I don't know, depending on where you are. Here is a comment. I think this isn't going to be Trump speaking. Maybe it is. Let's see. No, this is Trump from the debate. Then we'll get the response from a Republican governor.
What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
So again, so embarrassing. He is embarrassing. And he's pathetic too. He really is. There's no way he should be president. Let me Let me show. I want to get Mike DeWine, who's the governor.
I say one more thing.
Yeah, please. Sure.
Yeah, you were talking about the Sunday news shows, and I kind of peeked at most of them or all of them, and they all had J.D. Vance on yesterday, and he wouldn't totally, say that the stories about the immigrants eating pets was totally wrong. He'd say, "Well, I heard that, I saw that from somebody." So they really go all the way with these kind of conspiracy theories, and
I think admitting they're wrong they view as a terrible weakness. And I think a lot of people feel that way. It's very hard for people to admit they're wrong, especially in politics, and especially because when you admit you're wrong, it's often used against you rather than viewed as a sign of, well, okay, they learned, at least they won't, and you move on. It's like, remember when they said that about the cats and dogs? Even they had to admit they were wrong. So here's the governor of Ohio, no progressive, no liberal, no Democrat at all. This would be Mike DeWine. And he is just going to put the lie. I think this has to put the nail in the coffin. But again, we're looking at demagoguery, right, Arlen? We're looking at something that just is so ill becomes a person who should be president. Let's see if I can get this video up. And I actually had another clip I wanted to play. I forgot about, but let's get this up for you.
Yeah, well, Phil, this is the
we're not hearing it.
Day that bomb threats have targeted facilities all around the city. Today, it was 3 medical facilities and 1 unspecified location. All of those buildings were quickly cleared and reopened earlier this morning. Yesterday, I spoke with Mayor Rob Rue. He's pleading with those that are amplifying these unsubstantiated rumors about Haitians in his community to stop. He says that we need help, not hate at this moment.
And look, you are in the Rust Belt, very important to this election. How are the folks there reacting to all of this, especially the Haitian immigrants who live there?
Phil, I quickly learned as I was just driving in here, this is a very small town. It's a town of about 60,000 people, but over the last few years, about 15,000 migrants have settled here in just a few short years. Every single person that I spoke with today.
All right, I'm going to stop it there. That was the wrong clip. That's just detailing how it's really rough in Springfield for a lot of the immigrants. I don't know how loud that was, but the situation is bad. And what Trump did, what Vance is doing, they're demagogues. They're fomenting violence against immigrants, and it's a terrible, terrible thing.
Like you said, Hal, that they don't want to admit they're wrong. They don't want to admit any mistakes, especially Trump. His whole life, he's never admitted he was ever wrong or made a mistake or did anything, illegal or anything like that. But the problem is that his followers believe anything he says. If he says the election was stolen, they're going to believe it. If he says immigrants were eating pets, they're all going to believe it. And that's the most frightening thing of it all. Trump has a lot of power.
Well, okay, but I'm going to push back on that statement. I think there is truth to what you said. I think that in politics today, we're so divided, we're so polarized that if the person we dislike, we oppose, says something, we automatically don't believe them. And if the person that we do like says something or that we are going to vote for, we automatically do believe them. If you look on Facebook all over the place, there are all these memes mocking Trump's position on tariffs. And yet he's right, not 100%, and he imposed them in a sloppy fashion, and tariffs need to be used like a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. But ultimately, tariffs are essential to protecting good American jobs. And yet, despite that fact, the idea is completely rejected by 95% of Democrats because Trump says it. So the argument that his followers believe every word he says can also be rebutted by, or can be responded with, well, but those who disagree with Trump attack every single thing he says, even when he makes sense.
It's interesting, the tape that you showed, I believe, Tom Hartman talking about tariffs. And Hartman was saying just a few months ago that Joe Biden put tremendous tariffs on China, like 100% on a lot of things. And Hartman thought that was a great idea, and because so much of what we get from China is made with slave labor and made so
or
cheaply.
certainly low wage. I don't know if it's quite slave exactly, but it's close. They're paid very low wages anyway.
Yeah. So, so tariffs I think are a little iffy. I'm not sure what the, perfect answer is. I guess it all depends on what country and what kind of tariffs we're talking about.
Right. But actually, Trump was the one who started the tariffs on China, and then Biden kept them. And as I guess Hartman points out, even raised some of them. But I'm just making the point that we instinctively support or believe what somebody we are going to vote for says, and we instinctively rebel against what somebody we don't like says, even when sometimes they make sense. And Hartman is even a good example, because he can't even give credit in that clip. He only gives the credit to Biden, even though it was Trump who proposed those tariffs and imposed them in the first place.
I keep thinking of the free trade agreement, and Hartman was saying it was really Reagan that kind of pushed the, getting rid of the tariffs and
he started us down that road. Yeah. But don't forget, Bill Clinton signed NAFTA. W signed several disastrous free trade deals, and Obama continued the process, signing deals with Korea, Colombia, I believe, and Panama, all of which were harmful to our country. And Obama proposed and urged on us the big kahuna of trade deals, the TPP, which would have been pretty much put the nail in the coffin of American manufacturing. But his choice, Hillary lost. So
what I always think about when I think of all that is Ross Perot. Ross Perot was right. He said there'd be a giant sucking sound of jobs being lost, and he had the right answer, but he didn't go on because there were other forces that were stronger than him, and he was gone.
All right, we've got a few more minutes left, as Shade pointed out. By the way, I kind of made light of the concern he raised that he was waiting and then I didn't start. So it's a fair point. It's a good criticism, but I did want to get that title right, and I had it incorrect. He wasn't shot. He was threatened by a shooter. So we did get the title right. And as I've mentioned before, I do my best, and it's not always good enough.
You're not
go
perfect,
after me for it, but I'm not perfect. DeWine, I just showed the tweet. We don't need to play the clip. Before we go, this is a really, I believe, an important clip, and I meant to put it to show it when we were talking about Russia, because there's a lot of argument about why we're in Russia, why Trump wants to get out of Russia. Get us out of, not have the proxy war with Russia. I thought this was a very powerful clip. It may be slightly hard to follow. So if you have trouble with it, Arlen, let me know, and we'll see if we can. Hallen guest was recorded. Okay, so here we go. Let's see if I can get this up. Here we go. It's so trouble to the K Tusker. This is from earlier this year.
Tusker, why are people always picking on Russia?
Because, like I said, because Russia is a very large landmass filled with tons of natural resources, and they have sovereign control over their country. And we don't like it when a country has sovereign control over their resources, no matter where they are in the world, no matter whether they are liberal or communist or fascist. Now, the fascists will work with us because they'll help us get those resources from the people, but the others, not so. So that's always been the problem. They want to balkanize Russia. They want to split it up into tiny little pieces. They literally do want to install puppet governments, like all the Zelenskys and all the people in Serbia and all those, not Serbia, they're not one, but like all of those people, to have those puppet governments be able to put in their NGOs, to be able to run their PSYOP information campaigns, put their ruling class involved, and then they can dangle those countries by the strings like all the natural resources. They want to do that with Russia, they want to do it with China, and they want to do it with Iran.
Touche.
All right, so you understood that, right, Arlen? I hope you caught all of that. It was a little bit maybe soft, but you understood what she was saying?
I didn't quite get her point in the whole thing. Maybe you could.
Her point was that Russia is extremely wealthy in terms of natural resources, and Western multinational corporations are salivating at the opportunity to get at those. And that's why they're fighting to weaken Russia, divide Russia, peel off different bits of Russia so that they'll have access to the natural gas, the petroleum, the rare earth, etc.
Well, that may be what they want, but it's going to be awfully hard to get because Putin totally controls Russia, and he's not going to
Right. So should we be fighting a war? But her point is that's why we're fighting wars. That's why we're sacrificing millions of lives in terms of the casualties, in terms of deaths, because our corporate elite could make a lot of profit if we can destabilize Russia to the point where it implodes.
I wouldn't agree with that, Hal, because I think the main reason we're fighting Russia in this case or supporting Ukraine is because Russia invaded Ukraine, and that was illegal, and we can't allow Putin to get rewarded for that.
All right, I'll let you go. I'll let that go. I could push back. I have in the past, but I'll let that one go. All right, Arlen, we're not quite the hour. We don't need to keep going. Do you have anything you want to throw out there? I have some little memes. I know there's a talk about Russia trying to influence this latest election, and there's all these, I guess there's a media campaign they have. Is that something you think is going to likely sway the election?
Well, there's so many things that bother me. Everything from other countries trying to interfere with our election, with all of the social media things going on, with the possibility of artificial intelligence distorting things. I mean, it's going to be hard to have a reasonable and fair election like we used to have.
Well, wouldn't it be nice if we also had a candidate we actually could vote for and feel good about? I mean, I think all of the arguments that the Democrats and Trump, by the way, put forth claiming that the election isn't fair, that they were discriminated against, this, that, and that, those are just put there because they don't want to take responsibility for their bad policies and for being unlikable people who haven't put the American public first.
Well, my final fear I want to mention is that even if Kamala Harris wins, you have such a strong right-wing structure going on in this country that's not going to go away, and we're gonna be repeating this kind of thing all over again. So, and of course, who knows how much they're going to push back on the election results. The right wing if Kamala does win. So, we've got a lot of trouble ahead.
So you're more concerned with the Republican Party than the corruption in the Democratic Party?
Well, as we've talked about before, I like the Democrats to change, and I think that's important too. And I hope that Kamala would be open to that, and Democrats are open to that.
Thanks so much, Arlen. It's great to have you on. That's going to do it for today's program. Arlen, it was Monday with Arlen. I will be back tomorrow, and we will start at noon sharp, 12:00:00 Eastern Standard Time. Or no, actually, It's Eastern Daylight. It's not Standard yet. It'll be Eastern Daylight.